Hello everyone, this is Alexia. This is another episode of Every Breath Counts. I am delighted to be sitting here together with Despina Rangou. She's a somatic coach. Let me not forget to mention that this episode is sponsored by Holland & Barrett, like every other episode of Every Breath Counts. And let me not forget also to mention that I am delighted to be building this very strong community of people that have been watching our podcast, that have been sending messages, texts. And please let us know how you feel about our information, about our podcast, about the people that come here and talk. We want to know, the more we know, the better we can serve you. All right, let me get into this. Let me start by saying that Despina has this subtle energy, and that's the first thing that I felt when I first met her. We met through a screen first. So we spoke a little bit on the phone, and then we met on a Zoom call because I really wanted to see what you do. I was very interested to see what is it that you do. And the first thing that I sensed was this subtle energy, this grounding energy, this loving energy, and the fact that, hey, I can speak with Despina and I can be myself, and that's deliberating. So that is what I feel brought us here, because I want you to share that energy with people, and I also want you to share as to who you are and what is it that you do. I know that you have an artsy background, so tell us a little bit about you, Despina.
Hi, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks so much for having me. Yes, I do come from an artsy background. I studied visual communication in London. That's where I was living most of my 20s. I trained as a graphic designer, and I have experimented a lot with healing. I have been looking into healing modalities since 2017. That's when a really big poisoning event happened in my life, which kind of made me realize that a lot of the parts in me that I was looking to heal came from emotional and psychosomatic parts. So I went on a journey since then to discover myself. I had a really big life event that was around poisoning, and that really set me into this healing journey of discovering myself. I want to go a little bit backwards and just talk a little bit about how, when I was living and studying in London, I used to suffer from panic attacks, anxiety attacks. I had agoraphobia. I wasn't able to live my house so much, and I also engaged in a lot of addictive behaviors, exactly. And there was this big event happening in my life around 2017, which kind of sent me into this deeper healing about my emotional health. And from there, I took it as my mission, and I started exploring different healing modalities. I've traveled the world. I sat in plant medicine ceremonies, did all this yoga retreats, and I looked for something that I felt was mainly missing in Western medicine, only to find it later on in LA, fast forward 2 years ago. So it is this healing modality called somatic therapy. And it is based around the way that we experience our sensations and our emotions in our body, because 80% of the things that we think derived from sensations in the body. So it is a bottom-up approach to healing. And that's where I'm at. I felt like this was my calling. This has been my story. And I I want to share that with the world. I feel like it's something that is missing in a lot of the psychotherapy circles also.
Right.
Because we have the cognitive part of psychotherapy, and I feel like that's half of the story, because the other half is somatic.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's so interesting and inspiring how, you know, a personal experience will lead you to where you are right now, and it becomes so much more meaningful, I think, when it comes from within, you know.
Yes.
So you are looking for the answers, you are looking for the growth, you're looking for feeling better, and then there you are, you know, finding this in this modality. So would it be, Despina, would it belong to the mindful coaching? I don't like to put labels anyway, but I'm thinking, obviously, it's a mindful coaching derivative. Would that be something that you would say? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yes.
Yeah. It's basically, but the difference, I guess, with the somatic, which comes from the Greek word soma, so is that, as you said, it has a lot to do with sensations, it has a lot to do with feelings, and then you get to use different mechanisms, or you do different techniques or exercises to bring out those feelings. Talk to me a little bit, because, you know, we had this great session together, I have to share, where I was having a very busy day, I was appointment to appointment, and that's usually how I like my life to be. So the days that I work, they're usually, you know, tough, they're busy, and then I like to step away and take some time off to regroup, let's say. And it was one of those days that I was, you know, busy. And it was mid-afternoon when we had the session. It was a short session, it was our first session. And it was interesting how I felt so rejuvenated after that session. It was as if I took a nap, or it was as if I took some weight off my shoulders, and I was ready to seize another day from the beginning, to be honest. And I think I said it that day that, hey, I'm feeling energized again. I think that I came into the session pretty rushed and a bit tired, right? And then after the session, I was feeling, hey, I feel much more, I feel lighter, I feel rejuvenated. So that's when I thought, hey, people has to learn about what, you know, Despina is doing, right? So, and I found this saying, it says that, you know, it's assessing the body's wisdom, right? And with intelligence, and then you facilitate the growth, the transformation, and then the self-discovery. And I felt that, hey, that's what I felt in that session with the two of us. And you used many different techniques to get it to go where it went. Would you want to, you know, describe what you usually do? I know that it could be different from client to client, from person to person, but is there a method, is there a protocol that you follow? Tell me.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm so happy that you felt the experience and you were able to share it in your own way. I think that speaks for itself, you know?
It does.
So what I want to say is that somatic therapy is the language of the body. The language of the body is rhythm, heartbeat, temperature, emotions, smell, taste, vibrations. So you have all these different cues that are happening in our bodies. And what we do is that we use certain tools like breath work, so the grounding, diaphragmatic breath work. We use grounding techniques like orienting, which is basically like looking around the room. We use self-touch, like using our touch to center and ground into our sensations. We also did a visualization body scan. And what this mindfulness techniques do is that they ground us back into the body. And what we do also during our sessions is to pendulate and titrate. So pendulation is like when you go a little bit into the sensation, like a little bit into the tension, into where the body is holding tension, and then a little bit out of it. And we slowly approach those boundaries, slowly approach that wind of tolerance that we have with our sensations, and we start building a connection, a relationship. So the emotions, whatever is happening in the body, they stop being a problem, they stop being something that we want to avoid or we want to suppress or we think is a problem, and it becomes something that we lovingly accept, we become compassionate towards, and that builds like the capacity for growth in us. So it is a scientific principle. It is it's a science-based approach. And I can talk a little bit about how the nervous system works in a very simple way. I promise. And because I come from an artistic background, I like bringing in metaphors and images.
Love it.
So our nervous system, let's say, has this 3 different parts. We have inside us, we have like a dog, we call it a little puppy. And then we also have an owl, a wise owl. So these 2 represent the parasympathetic state and the sympathetic state. So when we approach a situation, let's say our nervous system was built to react to danger. So whether it's a lion in the room or a text or a person that we dread talking to, still our nervous system like sees that as a danger, as a threat. So what happens is the little puppy or the dog starts barking at the danger. And what happens is that sets off the wise owl. So that means we don't have the capacity to act in logical ways and to approach a situation with some sort of like wisdom, with the capacity to resolve. So the first thing that happens when the dog starts barking is to either fight, anxious, like we become like combative, we want to like, argumentative, rage, anger, or flight, which is anxiety, fear, and if we stay in that phase of our nervous system, what happens is a lot of times we even go into freeze mode. Freeze mode is like when we feel kind of unable to say anything in the situation. Numb, depressed. Depression is a derivative of the frozen state. And what we do with somatic therapy is we learn how to calm down the puppy, the dog, so that the owl can fly back in, and then we have the capacity to deal with whatever the trigger is in our environment, in our life, in a more constructive way, and learn from it. And this is how we heal. This is how we heal trauma. This is how we rewire our nervous system. And the tools that I use, especially the breath, the mindfulness exercises, I mean, it is amazing that a lot of the research the past 20 years have been measuring how mindfulness has a capacity to rewire our nervous system, to change, to promote neuroplasticity, change our habits. So when we start practicing mindfulness a little bit each day, we have the capacity to change and grow.
So you can't be trained to do this. This is wonderful. If you can start little by little by taking some time in a day, let's say, and start would you start by the breath, do some breath work, or how would you start? Well, that's the question, I guess. Where would you start?
To circle back into your question, when I work with my clients, what we do is we go through the different mindfulness practices and we start building those inner resources. Resourcing is a part of somatic therapy, is a really important part. It is about figuring out what an inner or outer thing in your environment or whatever you can find gives you the strength to deal with a trigger. So it's about building those resources. And how do I do this? We have a 40-day immersion practice. So it is a 6 weeks course, and we go through each resource, each somatic tool every week. We practice for an hour and a half. We go into the practices with this idea of, okay, we need to figure out what works for each of us, right? So it's not about like learning something or trying to like facilitate change, but more about figuring out like what works for me. Does the breath work for me? Because a lot of the times, let's say breath might work for somebody, but it might not for somebody else. And then what I do is that I give a little homework. Like a little...
I didn't get that, yes. Or did I? I did actually. I just didn't do it. Yeah, go ahead.
So you get little homework like audio files where you can practice, and then some prompts. And then the whole idea is to become more aware and to exercise, flex that muscle of mindfulness so that you have more capacity to deal with triggers.
Right. Well, you know what? I am seeing lots of women that are in this perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal years. And also younger ladies, younger women who are, dealing with many problems. They're dealing with shame, body shame. I want to put this on the table. Weight shame, right? And it could be a cultural thing, it could be a family thing, it could be what they've lived, But shame is something that I feel like comes up in my sessions as well. How do you deal with that? I mean, what's your experience in that?
I love this question because it really touches upon something that I have been dealing with. So I have been dealing with an eating disorder since teenagehood, and I must say that it's something that is always alive in me, and it's something that I'm always sort of nurturing. And I've just realized after trying all these different healing modalities that self-compassion and self-acceptance is the key to actually nurturing and loving ourselves back to healing. I find that from experience, like I wanted to change because I felt like changing would make me feel more loved, or it would make me feel more confident. Confidence plays a really big role in eating disorders. And one thing that I realized with somatic therapy is that the way that I build self-confidence is through acceptance, through self-compassion. When I'm being compassionate with myself, like not resorting to punishments, I find that is the way to really deal with those eating disorders.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, for example, let's say emotional eating. Emotional eating is like a really big part of eating disorder, and it has something to do with that trigger and the response. So when I start working with my nervous system and realize that in that moment of activation, let's say I'm feeling anxious or I don't really know whether it's fear or hunger, instead of reaching for the food, then I cultivate self-acceptance and grounding and just reassuring myself, telling myself it's okay, it'll pass, doing something that will bring me comfort, and then refraining from doing these self-destructive behavior that would then spiral me to resort to punishment afterwards, like over-exercising or starving myself, and just breaking that cycle. From the root.
Amazing. Yeah, I also think that an eating disorder, it's a hard thing to resolve. It might be something that you will have to carry in your bag forever, but I'm also a great believer there is so many things that you can do to get it to become a friendlier, to go in a friendlier zone. And one of those things is loving yourself, bringing in that compassion, recognizing the situation, recognizing the trigger, and then reacting upon it in certain ways. And I also agree with you that I can see how different techniques, different methods might work with some people, and then other people might need other techniques as well. So shame was one of the feelings that I came upon into our session, that I stumbled on in our session, and was the feeling of how am I living this life without my son being around. And it was so interesting how I felt accepted in that moment without you even saying that, hey, I accept you for what happened to you, for who you are, for wanting to continue to live a life even though this traumatic experience happened to you. So that was for me, I guess that's where the rejuvenating part came. That's how, my energy felt so much better. That's where I felt like, the weight of my shoulders was off. Interesting, very interesting. Despina, so the benefits, obviously, they're obvious. The benefits are obvious. So the more you do it, I guess, the better you feel. Would that be a fair sentence to put out there? So the more you train to do it, the better you feel?
Yes, there is a beautiful discovery on what self-compassion does to you when you practice it long term, and that is like linked to some spiritual practices that have been using self-compassion at their core. So when scientists went in and did the studies, they found that participants were able to make more empowering choices for themselves.
Absolutely.
They were able to accept their limitations, but also their strengths, which then built that level of self-confidence to go about changing. They also discovered that the more you trust yourself and the more compassionate you are with yourself, then you're likely are to extend the compassion to the people around you, which is basically what creates like this fulfilling relationship.
So as I was getting ready about our podcast, and I was reading about the somatic coaching and whatnot, I came across this this phrase. It was just describing as how somatic awareness can foster a deeper self-awareness, and then can be a pivotal for personal growth. And I'm thinking, I'm feeling I'm getting better at noticing emotions. I'm feeling I'm getting better as to how I react to my emotions. But then once it comes into dealing with the emotions in an environment that is closer to you, so let's say family or closest friends, I feel that sometimes I can't help it and I become very reactive as I used to be in the past. I also find that I am a little bit more compassionate about how I react. So I'm able to sit back and see that, hey, okay, the way you reacted wasn't the best. You should have used one of the tools that you have been training or learning here. And I have obviously a lot of more work to do here. But I feel that sometimes it becomes so hard to just sit back, watch, wait, and sit with the feeling, let's say, and not become reactive. So I guess all I'm trying to say is that the more you train towards this direction, the more it becomes a habit. And it's what you said earlier, that you're retraining the brain to work in a more facilitating way for your life. Would that be correct?
It makes complete sense. Well said. I also find that when I go into some relationships that have been shaped by my past, especially my childhood, which is a lot how my brain synapses were formed back then I tend to go into the familiar path, which is what I have experienced with that person, most likely disappointment, anger, rage, like I go into that fight or flight mode. And as you said, the first thing that I do is like being compassionate with myself, like giving myself some grace, because you know what, like this thing happens, like you know, I can't beat myself up to change, like that's not what somatic therapy is about. But also practicing mindfulness, like practicing self-soothing and being with our emotions and training the nervous system to rewire our responses, then gives you that capacity, gives me that capacity to respond differently. It is something that is quite physiological. It is something that is rooted within our nervous system. It is no longer something that is abstract or that lies within a black box. Like it is there, the science is there, you know, the proof that we can change is there. So it's just a matter of like keeping a practice, like
and learning how to do it.
Well, that's the thing with the somatic therapy and mindfulness. It's something that everybody can do. Unlike meditation. Meditation, it is a specific practice. It's what we call the container of going into practicing mindfulness. But mindfulness is something that we embody naturally, like as ourselves. So like the way that we carry ourselves, the way that we sit opposite each other, the way that we go about eating our food, the way we go about like, you know, consuming content, like all of the ways that we exist. When we bring our awareness to that present moment and be in it, immersed in it, then we have that capacity of becoming more mindful and more aware into how we approach situations. But apart from that, I think the practice, the actual practice with the breath, the breath work, you know, the actual
the movement even. We did some movements, like a dancing kind of thing. I thought that was very interesting and deliberating as well. And I keep using the same words because that's what I felt. I felt kind of, you know, freedom, you know.
Beautiful, yes. We did together this introductory session where we went through a lot of the tools just so that I can give you an idea of what it is that the 40-day course is. And what you're referring to, I believe, is the shaking. The shaking is basically like loosening up the fascia. You know, there's a lot of literature now about how we don't have different muscles, but like how our muscles are within one system that is connected. And a lot of the trauma, a lot of the emotional responses, a lot of the emotional responses that got trapped in our nervous system, which is what is causing stress, are stuck in the fascia. So like when we move in that way, we are releasing it, and then with the somatic therapy, we learn to be with it, ground ourselves in it, and build a relationship. And that that makes the window of tolerance
also wider.
Absolutely. There is a beautiful quote on what you said that says, between stimuli and response lies a space. And in that space, you choose how to respond. And in that response lies your growth and your freedom. And this is by Viktor Frankl. Why are you allowed when you're perimenopausal? What is this excuse?
That's a whole other story.
You're allowed because
I'm going to elaborate soon.
You're excused because you're human, and it's okay. You know, we're not meant to be like perfect. There is no such thing as perfection.
Yes, I'm perfectly imperfect.
Exactly, like messy and chaotic, and that we forget, and you know, it's just about like embodying who we are.
But perimenopause comes with brain fog
Right.
as well.
Okay, so that's like
So it's a
specific...
hormonal thing. It's
Yes.
a state where this happens. So as serotonin and as progesterone and estrogen start to fluctuate, you get all these symptoms, and one of them is this brain fog. And because it's really new for women, it's something that is terrifying as well. So you get into a room and you can't remember why you got into that room. Or the first time that I encountered with that, it was when I was doing a presentation. I knew this presentation like very well, so I knew every slide. I didn't have to look at my presentation, and I forgot this one word that was really important. And I was like, oh, okay, where is this coming from? And it starts to bother you. It starts, you start to feel. But there is certain things that you can do, and I feel that somatic coaching is one of them. It's one of those modalities that you can also put in this list of things that you can do to facilitate this phase, to find answers in this phase, to get through some of the symptoms in this phase as well, to be honest.
Yes, absolutely. To also accept that this is part of life.
To accept that this is happening, it's gonna be happening. I think that's the first stage. You're totally right. Despina, it's been such a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for this.
Thanks so much for
I
having
hope
me.
next time we do it, we do a live session of how you would go about doing a coaching session. I think that would be interesting for people to see, because you know what, some people they can't really understand what's this about, so there is some fear behind it, I feel, when I mention it at the office. So the more we show to people and they understand what it's about, the more they're gonna want to engage and experience it by themselves.
Absolutely, yes, I agree.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.